Hey, good afternoon. It is Tuesday, July 16th. I am Rob, that developer dad, and this morning we adjusted our system architecture to incorporate some LLM capabilities. Now, we didn't actually add the LLM or any components that'll talk to it yet, but we did make a plan for those. And I want to bring up GitHub wherever it is. I do not have a GitHub window here, but I'll get there real quick. GitHub, and I'll share my screen. We'll pop over to this. Here we go. And let's go into GM Tools. And I want to look at the projects. We'll open this in a new tab. And our minimum viable project, minimum viable product is what MVP stands for. Yesterday, we got to the point where we could create a basic rough description of an NPC and have that as the simple output from our console application. And when we got there, I realized, oh goodness, I could copy and paste this JSON into ChatGPT, and it was generating some pretty nicely fleshed out non-player character descriptions for me. So my project manager, I am the project manager, decided, hey, what if we pivot and bring LLM integration into the minimum viable product? And then as we flesh out all of these other species and background and vocation details and all of that other stuff, it'll just automatically get included in the data that we send to the large language model and give it more to work with. And I recently got my hands on a old laptop with a decent amount of RAM and a decent processor. Unfortunately, the GPU is from 2015 or something like that, so it's not compatible with the CUDA libraries or anything like that required for GPU acceleration of LLM stuff. But it's an old laptop. It's got plenty of RAM, plenty of storage, and a good enough processor to run a small language model locally here on my local area network. So this morning I redid the architecture, and we can take a look at that. Let me load this. Yep. Okay. I'm going to save my diagrams to my device. I'm going to open. Let's pop this guy open. So prior to this morning's changes, we didn't have this GM Tools workload coordinator API-ish thing. We also didn't have an intelligent workload manager or an LLM access component on our diagram. And the LLM access component is just going to provide a pass-through with the necessary compute massaging to take a prompt and some grounding data and pass that through to the LLM, wait for the result, extract what we need from it, and return that out to the workload manager. But I've got these guys separated off from the main system, and I think I want to draw a rectangle around them to designate that they are, in fact, a subsystem of this application. I'm going to pull this up a little bit. We're going to send it to the back. Now, let's change the fill from that. Let's go to a gray. Okay. Yep. Great. Now I want to add some text. Where's the edit text? Edit style, edit data. I think I just double click on it. AI subsystem. And I want to pull, whoops, highlight that. It's going to the top. Where's the top? We'll pull it all the way to the right. And then font style, don't need any of that. Where is the vertical alignment on this? Text, push it to the top. There we go. Font color, I'm going to go with black. Here's black. Apply it. And I want to bump the text. Let's take it to 14. All right, good. So that's our AI subsystem. And it's going to live logically separate from the rest of the system. And we identified another utility, serialization. Okay. Excuse me. So let's get into the code. I want to save. And let's go ahead and export as a PNG. Yeah. Export. I don't need the .draw IO. Save it. And we'll open this. Cut it from here. Go to C projects /me GM tools doc images paste replace. Okay. So our GitHub task right now, our first one, we need to add an interface and first implementation class to the AI workload manager component. And while I'm here, why don't I change the name of this to AI workload manager? And I gave this a proper name as well. Where's Visual Studio? It's up here in API, gametools.api.workloadprovider. Back over here, API dot workload provider. Okay. So we've created this, and before the break, I reworked the client to call this, which calls the townsfolk manager and generates an NPC. Great. Now I need to add an AI workload manager. So let's save and export this again. PNG, export, get rid of the additional extension again. Save. Okay. I don't want the download link. I just want this. Copy. And GM tools, oops, doc. Come on. images. Paste and replace, yes. All right, so that's all synchronized with what we're dealing with. Now that development dad.ai workload manager.cs project, we don't need that open. What we do need is a contracts, add new folder, and I'm actually, instead of calling it contracts, nope, I'm going to call it contracts. I almost decided to call it abstractions, but changed my mind at the last second. So there's that. Add new item. I need an interface. And it's going to be AI workload manager. We're going to make it public. And string describe NPC. String NPC JSON. Save it. And out here, let's rename this file to AI workload manager. All right, yes, I do want to do that. And we're going to implement AI workload manager. And let's fix our formatting first. Implement the interface. All right, describe NPC. We're receiving the NPC JSON. Okay. We also, out here in the GitHub workspace, I have add interface and first implementation class to the AI workload manager component. And I've left myself some notes here. I've already deviated from my plan. So we need a test LLM method on the interface. We're going to implement this on the workload manager class to call into the LLM access provider, pass a simple prompt with no additional data. And we're just going to do this to make sure we can call the local LLM from C# code. And I have here in big capital letters, don't get fancy yet. So let's follow my plan. I'm going to add string test LLM. That's all it's going to do is just run a test against the LLM. So I got to implement my interface. We're going to leave this as throwing a not implemented exception for the time being. And so what we need to do, well, how are we going to test this LLM? Because this is a manager, we need to delegate the actual connection to the API off to our ResourceAccess method. So we're gonna need something that can act as that for us. So we're gonna add a new project. And following the pattern of oops, all class libraries, it's just going to be a class library. It's going to go into GM Tools source resource access. And this is not going to be part of the game tools system. This is, I'm going to put this under that developer dad dot LLM access. And let's go next. Yes, we'll do .NET 8 long-term support. Here we go. First thing we need is an interface, because we want to make sure we're doing proper dependency inversion, all of that stuff. So we want our external components to talk to concepts. We're going to call this prompt execution. Yeah, that'll do. And we're going to make it public. All it's going to do is string execute prompt, string prompt. Save. Nope. Save. There we go. And now out here, oh, I didn't do the thing where I put all of my public stuff into its own namespace. And there's a reason I do that. Yep, fine, do it. Yes, adjust the namespaces, great. The reason I put my interfaces and data transfer classes and all that stuff into a contracts folder is because at some point it might become necessary to publish an assembly or a package that contains only those code entities, so that somebody else who wants to do it, implement this differently, or needs to implement those contracts differently from the way I'm doing it here, they can just grab the public interfaces and the classes and all of that stuff, the public contract for the component, reference that, and then build their own implementations against those interfaces, and then slide their implementation into their solution where the default LLM access component may have lived before. So we need to rename class 1, and we're just going to call this prompt execution. Yes. Let's implement prompt execution. Execution, I spelled it right, good. We got to add our using, and let's implement the interface. Execute prompt. Now, all this guy is going to do, and I've got some unsaved changes here, so I'm going to go ahead and save all right now. And I should add my comment over here. Executes a simple text prompt against a language model and returns the reply. The user prompt to send, and it returns the reply from the LLM. Save. Very good. And inherit doc. Save that. Now, how do we do this? Well, I did some digging because I've used the library we're going to use for this for quite some time when I was at my previous employer doing some R&D work on integrating language models into business software. And Microsoft has created a library called the semantic kernel. And that acts as an abstraction layer between our code and some large language model provider service. And we're going to use that. So first thing we got to do is manage our NuGet packages. And we're not going to browse. We are going to browse, I should say. And we're looking for semantic kernel. Give me the goodies. All right, core orchestration, runtime, and functions, common package collection, SK Core, OpenAI, Azure OpenAI, DALL-E 2. That's a lot of stuff. And then there's handlebars and semantic kernel core and all that stuff. We're not using pre-releases. I want to bring in just this. 151, it's under the MIT license. Other useful packages. Only selecting individual semantic kernel components. Let's actually bring in this. Yeah. Yep, we're going to pull in the whole shebang here. Let's install that. And it's doing its thing. Running, installing all the things. Yep, it sure does bring in a lot of stuff. Let's apply that. Yep, accept that, because there's a bunch of licenses. Not all code paths, return a value, that's nice. That's fine. And we've got some package warnings over here. What are our vulnerable packages? It doesn't show any. Is there a pre-release in here that's vulnerable? No? Okay. Duh. I've got it filtered down to semantic kernel. System.text.json. Let's see if there is a more recent version of system text JSON that is not vulnerable. 804 looks good. Let's install that. Yep. Apply. Okay, good. Great. All right. So I did a quick lookup in between this morning and now, and I'm going to pull this guy over here, connect to and chat with the AI model. And I've done some experimentation with the different type of model or the different API endpoints. There's a chat completion endpoint, and then there's a text generation or just a plain text completion endpoint. And the text completion endpoint is not fantastic in as exposed through Phi3 Mini. So we're going to use the chat completion endpoint for this experiment. So here's what I got to do. First thing, prompt execution using, and we're going to go ahead and develop this semi-iteratively, we're going to red-green refactor-ish, because I'm not absolutely certain how all of this is going to shake out yet. So we're going to just do a little bit, and then we're going to look at what happened, and then we're going to do a little bit more to make it better, and we're going to iterate very rapidly towards success. So first thing I need to do is bring in our dependencies. So using, come on, I'm not typing, using Microsoft.semantic kernel, boop. And then we're going to say using Microsoft.semantic kernel dot, not Macrosoft, you silly goose. Microsoft.semantic kernel dot chat completion, and we'll save. Now, down here in execute prompt, we're gonna do this quick and dirty, just super quick and dirty. AI workload, test LLM, throw new, not implemented exception. I'm gonna get rid of that compiler error. It's bugging me. And let's pin the error list. Let's load up let's show the test explorer. Oh, come on. Test exploder, pin it. And I want to drop the error list in here. There we go. Now I can shrink that down, get it out of my way. All right, so we got that resolved. Prompt execution, let's come back here. Execute prompt. First thing we need is an instance of the kernel. Equals kernel.create builder. And this uses that Fluent API type thing, add open AI chat completion. And you're silly. Model ID equals phi3 mini. Endpoint is, I installed this thing called Bruno down here that essentially gives me access, or is basically a fully open source version of Postman. Now it doesn't like just a string, so I got to give it a new URI. API key. For this, because I'm running it locally, string.empty. And then finally, .build. Bam. Now, it really doesn't like all of this stuff. What is it complaining about? Oh, it's for evaluation purposes only. So we got to set up a pragma warning. Not a fan of those. Luckily, over here in the source code from Microsoft Learn, we've got the pragma warning right here. Execute prompt. All right, so var AI service equals kernel dot get required service of type iChat completion service. All right. I'm gonna shrink that over to the side here so that we can see all of the things that we're dealing with. And that basically just gives us a more easily referenceable instance of the chat completion service that we're going to be using. Var chat history equals new chat history object, which is something that comes in through the semantic kernel libraries. And instead of while true, because this just gets us into a loop, we may not even need that history object, but we're going to find out in a second. So we are going to string simple prompt equals how many days are in a week. And we are going to chat history dot add. And I just noticed that we do in fact need that chat history object to interact with this API. So that's fine. And the chat history, it needs a new chat message content with author role, which is a predefined author role, content collection items, model ID, yeah. We're just going to pass in author role dot user. We're going to pass in the simple prompt. That must be another one of these overloads. Yeah, just pass in the simple prompt and complete that line of code. All right, so we've added the simple message to the prompt. And so now what we're going to do is await for each. I'm not a big fan of doing it this way. Var item in AI service dot get streaming chat message contents async with the chat history. We'll do that. String AI response equals string dot empty. Do that. AI response plus equals item dot content. And then all we're going to do is return item dot AI response. Let's save this. So here's our prompt execution. How many days in a week? Great. What's this complaining about? Return type of an async method must be. All right, so I can't just do public async string. I have to do public async task of string. We can save that. And now I have to adjust this so that it is task. And I want to rename this to execute prompt async. Save. Okay, so here's our iPrompt execution. And we did pass in the ability to send in a prompt. So over here in prompt execution, instead of doing the simple prompt, I'm going to just pass prompt. And that simple prompt, it's going to go out to whatever we use as a test harness when we go to run this. Excuse me. So our AI workload manager, we're going to pop back out. I'm going to cut that line of code. Come out here. Simple prompt, great. How many days in a week? Now we're going to need a prompt execution component. Private, read only, I prompt, execution. Well, gosh, do we have a reference to that? Nope, no we don't. That's okay. Let's pin our Solution Explorer out here. AI Workload Manager. Okay, we need a project reference to LLM Access. We're also going to want a project reference to my utility framework as well. Okay, so there's that. Add the reference to the contract, LLM provider. AI workload manager doesn't take in anything, but we need my prompt execution component, LLM provider. And we can't give the parameter the same name as the module level variable. LLM provider equals that. Great. We'll get rid of this. And string result equals LLM provider dot execute prompt async, simple prompt. Why is it grumpy? It's grumpy because the execute prompt doesn't return a string, it returns a task. Now, in JavaScript, this similar concept exists, but I believe in JavaScript they call this a promise. So in order to get the actual string that lives inside this deferred execution method, we have to do, we can't end the line of code there. Stop that. Dot result. And that is going to cause it to wait until execute prompt async finishes and returns our result. And then, of course, we can return the result. Control S, very good. Now we want to be able to test this. So let's come out to our console client. And we need to add some new dependencies. Whoops, dependencies, add project reference. We're going to add LLM access because we have to be able to supply that here, and our AI workload manager. And we can already see that our console client is starting to get an awful lot of dependencies that we maybe don't want it to have. But for now, there's nothing we can do about that. So let's save, close that, and we'll come into program. And we need to add a new service. So this is all the stuff that we need. Region and townsfolk subsystem. And I'm going to hide that right there. We don't really need to see all of that stuff all the time. Let's create a new region, AI subsystem. And region. And I'm going to pop that guy back open again here. And services.addScoped. Add scoped of AI workload manager, comma, did I call it? Nope. AI workload manager. Great. And then before we can add that, because it uses the LLM provider, add scoped I prompt execution. Execution. Is this public? Yeah, good. And it's complaining about something. What doesn't it like about that? Let's find out. All right, we just had to add a reference to LLM access. So there's that. Save it. And up here, rather than calling into the character workloads app, I'm going to comment this stuff out temporarily just so that we can see what's going on. And we'll bring that back in a minute. So var LLM test equals services dot get required service of type AI workload manager. That's all I need there. String test result equals LLM test dot test LLM console dot write line test result. I expect that this is gonna throw a bunch of exceptions. So we're gonna drop that code into a try block. And then we're gonna catch basically anything, any kind of exception. And I'm just going to console.writeLine, ex.toString. No, ex dot what? Get type dot name. And we're going to write the message. Save it. Drop a breakpoint right here. And let's try this. And it's building. And it's doing the things. Let's actually pop that up here. And pin it. Good, it's pinned. We're paused. Let's step over. Is LLM test a thing? It sure is. So let's step in. Simple prompt. How many days are in a week? Let's step in here. We're setting up our kernel. We've got our AI service. Fantastic. We've got chat history, which is what we provide to the chat completion service. And then it does some stuff inside itself to figure out what the actual prompt we want to send is. So we're going to add a new message of just how many days in a week. AI response is string empty. And just for laughs, let's drop a breakpoint in here just for a minute and run it. So we have item.content, and it's just a single word. Our AI response is that. Let's let it rip. Continue to the next stop. There are, what's the content? Is it just a space? No, it's 7. Okay, so we see that we're getting results back and they're coming back streamed. So let's just hit continue. There are 7 days in a week. These are blah, 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 blah. And then it gave me a whole doctoral dissertation about all of the days of the week and all of that stuff. And that's great, but it's a whole lot more wordy than I wanted it to be. Now, let's try running this without breakpoints just to see how long it takes. Just visually, I don't want to add a stopwatch or anything like that yet. But let's run it. And it's doing its thing. And it's going to respond eventually. We could look over at the server and see that it's doing things. It just finished streaming the response. And here we are. There are 7 days in a week. Yeah. Great. So we know the LLM is responding to our request. So how do we use that? We can grab this stuff Get rid of it. We don't need that anymore. We can uncomment this. So we've got our character workloads. That's sort of like the API shim. And we can get rid of the generator console altogether. Goodbye. Excuse me. Now our character workloads app. Let's go to the definition of this. So it needs all this stuff. It now also needs private, read-only, AI workload manager, LLM provider is what I'm just going to call the variable here. Great. Let's add that as a parameter here. AI workload manager. LLM provider. LLM provider equals LLM provider. Great. Save that. And I like to have my parameters, especially when they're multi-line like this. I like to have them lined up. Just makes things a little bit easier to read. Let's save all. Now our program is going to throw up all over us now because, well, it needs all of these dependencies, right? So what do we do here? I think a better way to do this would be static character workloads build app. And we need to pass the services collection. Okay. This, nope. I'm not sure what the keystroke combination in a remote desktop from Mac to Windows is for highlight the whole bloody line. We're going to cut that. We're going to paste it down here. And this isn't really dependency injection-y, or this isn't very dynamic programming of me, but I don't care. Townsfolk, Wattens, Townsfolk, manager, TF, manager equals, change service provider from service provider to services, services.get required service. Yep. AI workload, AI MGR equals services.get required AI workload manager. Great. Character workloads. Shift control. Townfolk manager. AI manager. Save it. Return app. character workloads app equals build app. Passing in the services, we got our things. All right, we can generate the NPC. Let's save everything. Up here in character workloads, if include AI, string description equals LLM provider dot describe NPC, and it needs the JSON for the NPC that we've built. I don't want to go over time today, so what we're going to do is we're going to leave this alone for now, because we don't have anything triggering this code right now, because nothing is passing include AI into our generate NPC method. Out here in program, we're just saying generate NPC. Let's run it one last time before we call it a day. We're generating a gnome who used to be a soldier, but is now a painter. And tomorrow, we're going to dig into semantic kernels, prompt creation, and prompt rendering, and all of those internal capabilities that make it relatively easy for us to execute a variety of LLM operations through basic C# code. No Python, no JavaScript, no nothing. Good old-fashioned talking to dotNet classes. And until then, I wish you a good evening. Get some rest, eat some delicious food, spend some time with your friends, and have yourselves a great day. I'll see some of you tomorrow.